I'd like to quote Captain or Sergeant James Dokes and say, "Surprise, motherfucker," But I think, which I could do on this show since it's my show, and but it's always a fun surprise when Dwain McFarland and I can get together and get to talk shop. So his work from Fantasy Life, and he just does. He's one of my favorite people, absolute favorite people in this industry. And if I won a lottery multiple times over, before I buy the RSP Island for the Brandon Lloyd Invitational, I'd probably make sure I could hire Dwain away, and so that he could work for me and and do whatever the fuck he wants. I would be quite okay with that. So welcome, Dwain. We're going to have a good time talking about your model and the RSP.
Well, thank you very much. And on that note, everybody, please go visit fantasylife.com, which Matt also loves. But yeah, dude, we've been working together a long time. Yeah. So we have just become really good friends. And it's I always love coming on the show, but because it feels like just like probably every other week we might chat on the phone. When we do the show, it's almost the same as just when we chat on the phone. It's just two dudes hanging out.
And the way you responded to that, I just realized that maybe it sounded like you weren't happy there, which is not remotely the case. I'm just saying,
don't get me fired.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look, no offense to Joe and football guys. I love football guys too, but if I won $1 zillion and I could just do the RSP, I would still always show up as an alum at football guys. But yeah, I'd hire Dwain away, and I would and spend as much money as I could to do that, and I would just do this shit. So I mean, it's no offense to anybody there, but it's the truth. So so let's get.
Well, I'm flattered, and I appreciate you saying the kind words.
Yeah. So we'll move on. So let's start off with somebody that we can be a little bit blunt about, and that's Tyler Warren. Apparently we both, the model and the RSP, are a little lower on Tyler Warren. So why is it that you're not as high on him?
Yeah, and so what's interesting, with the supermodel, it's mostly based on, the number one input is draft capital. So Tyler Warren's still going to score in the top 5 all-time tight ends in the model, but I have a version of the model, Matt, where I remove draft capital, right? It's more, okay, now I'm just going to take all the other data elements that have shown to be predicted to the future, take the draft capital out. And for tight end, what's really interesting, the correlation to future success over the first 3 years of a tight end's career is 0.70. That's the same as draft capital itself. And once I add draft capital in, it goes to 0.76. So yeah, it's stronger with draft capital, but the models perform really well without draft capital for tight ends. Also for running backs, a little less so for wide receivers, and we'll talk about some of them here in a bit. But when you remove that draft capital, he actually drops 24 spots in my all-time tight end rankings going back to 2018. So he's essentially dropping from being the 4th or the 5th best to being around 30. And the big thing about it in the model does come down to his production rating. So whenever you look at it, the production rating, the way it works is it really gets adjusted for multiple things, right? So it's looking at, what he did earlier in his career versus later. You get credit for all of it, but it's weighted. You get weighting towards doing things earlier in your career. That's shown signal in the model. It also adjusts for the strength of schedule you played, the teammates you played with, were you on a stacked team? And essentially each one of those elements, it gives you an expected number the model thinks you should have hit, and then it looks, were you above or were you below that? And then it weights all of those things together based on which things matter more or less in the model, and it gives you a score. And whenever you look at Tyler Warren, the big thing here is he comes in the 30th percentile in his adjusted career receiving yards per team pass attempt. So essentially Tyler Warren, had he come into the draft last year, which would have been year 4 for him at Penn State, he might have been a 4th to 6th round draft pick. And now suddenly people look at him as being this high-end round 1 caliber player. And to be fair, like Lance Zierlein, whose film grades have done really good, I've included them in the model because they have scored so well. He gives him a film rating, that in the model makes it a 90. And everything in the model is on a scale of 50 to 100. So a 90 being really good, it's actually 1 point above what he gave Brock Bowers the year before. So that's also helping him out, but it's really that production, the fact that he didn't really do anything until later in his career. And it's giving him credit for playing with Theo Johnson and Brenton Strange and Pat Freiermuth. But the way the model works is it looks at those players and it knows that they got drafted by the NFL, but none of them were hyper productive in college. So the model also looks at that as being, it's not like there was this insurmountable barrier to you getting more playing time early in your career. Yeah, we'll give you a little bit of a bump for it. So like if I took that away and just looked at, what he would have looked like in the model without getting that bump for playing with those guys, right? It would have been even lower. So that some models giving him a little bump, but still 30th percentile is really low. Now, the thing that is positive about his production profile is the fact that when he did get his opportunities, he was really good. And so the factor I use for that in the production rating is your career targeted quarterback rating. So when your quarterback targeted you, what did you do with your opportunities? And those things are complementary, right? Because receiving yards per team pass attempt is looking at like your role in the overall offense and what that looked like over time, versus the career targeted quarterback rating is saying, okay, well, great, but when you did get your opportunities, like how good were you with them? And he was great, like 125.2 quarterback rating. That's the 79th percentile. So, but that adjusted career RIPTA gets more weight than the quarterback targeted rating based on what the data has told me. So when you take it out, yeah, he drops 24 spots in the model. And then when I hear people that, really pay attention to the film talking about it, Lance gave him a really good grade, but I noticed in the RSP, you had him lower. You had him quite a bit lower. And then I heard Ben Solak talking with Mina Kimes, and it wasn't that he didn't like Tyler Warren, but he was more concerned that he might need a fit because so many things were designed for him underneath the coverage, setting up things, clearing things out. Honestly, kind of we'll talk about Luther Burden later, but some of the concerns people talk about with Luther Burden as a receiver, like you hear the same things around tight end for the people that really watch the film. So I'm super curious at like hearing for you in the RSP, what was the thing that really brought him down? Because you were even harder on him. Like now the supermodel, I guess, like if I moved him down 24 spots, that's a lot in the all-time ranks since 2018 in the model. But even this year, like you didn't have him in your top 3 in the RSP, which really caught my eye.
Yeah, he's 5th. And now the score is solid enough. Like he's got an 83, I believe, and which is essentially a guy or somewhere in the low 80s, which is essentially, look, put him on a team that needs a tight end. And you want to fit his role to what he does well, he can be productive. And what he does well is win the ball in the air against tight coverage and at the boundary. He does well when he gets a nice runway and open space like Tucker Kraft on a flat route and be able to run after the catch.
It's so funny you said that because when I was watching Tyler Warren, and I don't give film grades, I lean into people like you guys, but the first person I thought of was Tucker Kraft.
Well, I
last year.
There's something, and there's something
Yeah.
I want you to do for me, if you don't mind, while I share my thoughts on this. Is I'd love to see what the scores were for Tucker Kraft and Michael Mayer, because when I see Tyler Warren, I see him as a combination of those guys. Michael Mayer, the film people loved. They thought he was like, one of the top tight ends in the class. And when I watched Michael Mayer, I wasn't very high on him either because I thought, man, he's fantastic at the catch point. He's a really good zone route runner. He can give you a little bit after the catch in open space. And if you put him one-on-one in a compressed area of the field, he can win there too. But is he going to line up and be Travis Kelce, Sam Laporta, Brock Bowers? No way. So when I looked at Warren, I saw the same things. Like I saw a guy who's like, yeah, he wins like Gesicki or like Michael Mayer, like where he can extend above the rim and away from his frame. But if you're asking him to run one-on-one, man-to-man routes like Brock Bowers or Sam Laporta, you're going to realize that one is not like the other two. And to me, if you're going to rate someone as high as Brock Bowers, you've got to account for the fact, now for me, maybe it's the difference between where Lance and I are, is that Lance this is going to be a twofold question here, because Lance, I would assume, would then probably put more value on blocking than maybe I do, though I give it pretty good value in my scoring. But I primarily, for me, I want to lean it towards guys who can catch as the early round guys, and I'm modeling after what Bill Belichick used to say about tight ends. Is like, you pick the receivers in the early rounds, you can get the blockers later. But blocking, obviously, if you're a really good blocker and a good receiver, that should put you at the top.
Right. Yeah.
I learned a
So,
lot. Let me just finish with this part. Is like I learned a lot from Lance watching him break down tape on my show about blocking from an offensive line standpoint. And when I watched Warren block, he doesn't punch, he hugs people. He gets dangerously close to holding and can't sustain blocks, and he has a lot of technical issues that kind of concerned me. So I would have loved to pick Lance's brain on what he sees in him as a blocker or what he projects that maybe he's a little easier on, thinking that Warren will get there. But I see Warren as a guy who eventually could improve his blocking and become a decent starter, but it's going to be limited to the roles I talked about with Mayer or Tucker Kraft, a combination of both.
Yeah, for Warren, like, honestly, it's just the production thing that's killing him in the supermodel. Like, if you look at Michael Mayer's like production rating, everything's on a scale of 50-100 again in the supermodel. It's a 92.
Okay.
Tyler Warren was at a 72. If you look
Okay.
at Tucker Kraft, he was at an 82. And so what that means in the non-draft capital model, Michael Mayer actually would be third all time. Tucker Kraft would be 18 all time, and Tyler Warren would be 29th.
Okay.
So expected draft capital is huge for Tyler Warren, as well as Lance's film grade, which is a 90. That is and again, I'm converting that film rating. His film grade is actually 6.77, the way Lance's works. But that is, like I said, one spot over Brock Bowers. It's one spot below TJ Hawkinson. Kyle Pitts had the highest film rating that Lance had given since 2018 at 7.19. But the big thing really is the production and the fact that Tyler Warren just did absolutely zilch really until his senior year, which you historically, like, it is a red flag. Now the model doesn't look at it as binary and say, oh, Tyler Warren's out, because he has all the other things. And ultimately, like, if an NFL team takes him in the top 10 picks, like, they may have a really good plan for him. They may know these things about his game that are limitations, and they want to use him in the way that, like, really works for him, which is like, okay, let's just get him the ball quickly in space. And I think we can all agree, like, wow, watch Tyler Warren with the football in his hands. Like, that's a lot of fun. But I do wonder if part of the reason he did not break out earlier in his career wasn't so much that Theo Johnson and Brenton Strange and Pat Freiermuth were there, but it was because you really needed to design a specific kind of offense to now feature this guy.
Yeah.
And I think the other factor was they didn't have any other receivers last year at Penn State. It was literally Tyler Warren or bust.
And when
like
when you evaluate players, you've got to evaluate them from the standpoint of where they're most likely to fit. But, like, if you have the more scheming you have to do to get the greatness out of a player, the narrower it becomes. And, like, there's a level where you could say it's reasonable where a guy who's schemed a little bit more but has special skills can be high on an evaluation. You know, to me, Savion Williams is a good example of a player who, or Cordero Patterson, if you were going to grade him in college as a potential running back, you could probably say he has a concentrated level of skills that, like, if you put him in a gap style offense and let him catch some passes out of the backfield, he would be higher up than a guy like Frank Gore who could run every type of scheme. But, you know, at the same time, if you took, you know, Anthony McFarland and said, let's put him in this very specific set of things and he does it elite, you might have like 4 plays, you know, and now you're like, that's too limiting. And I look at Warren, Dwayne, and it's funny because, like, I look at it and I go, Brenton Strange was a better blocker. Pat Freiermuth was a better blocker than all of them. As a route runner, I would say Freiermuth, Strange, and who was the last? Oh, Theo Johnson. Theo Johnson were better route runners than Warren, I think.
That would be the big concern. The blocking, like the Bill Belichick thing, and I think we see this in NFL draft capital over the first 2 rounds. For the most part, the teams are focusing on the receiving profile.
Yes.
You do start to see a few blocking tight ends, you know, sneak into round 2, like a Drew Sample and guys like that, which is always weird. Why would you spend a second-round pick on a blocking tight end?
Yeah.
And maybe they thought he was more as a receiver of the Bengals. But I think when I look at Tyler Warren, like, the big thing I think you're hitting on I think the biggest part is route running and the ability to separate and the ability. Do you think he has upside as far as maybe he was just asked to do these certain things at Penn State, but ultimately he could do a lot more? Or do you feel like, no, probably there's some limitations here?
Yeah, I mean, he looked to me more like Mike Gesicki type than he looked
That's
like
when I turned on the film, other than watching him run after the catch. And again, I am not the expert you are on the film, but I saw more of an H-back.
Yeah. I saw Mike Gesicki H-back who was great at getting away from winning the
Who
ball.
I would really say was I almost saw more Kyle Juszczyk.
Wow, look at that. Yeah. But Kyle's
a great blocker.
Yeah, Kyle's a great blocker and a little more mobile as an athlete.
Gesicki felt more vertical to me than Tyler Warren. I do what you're see what you're saying though, even though it might have been like a lower average depth of target, like the extending away and making the contested catch thing. Tyler Warren definitely did that.
But that's why
Gesicki I saw as a guy that was much better at like attacking the seam of a defense than what we saw with Tyler Warren.
Yeah, and that's why Michael Mayer and Tucker Kraft are really the more reasonable looks for me based on playing style, because Mayer wasn't as good vertically either.
What did you think about Trey McBride though when he came out? Because I think you could make the argument that if you look at the way the Cardinals used Trey McBride today, the model liked Trey McBride, but I felt like he had some of these similar concerns, and the Cardinals have settled into this situation where they don't ask him to run down the seam and stuff all the time. If you go watch like Trey McBride play, he's leaking into the flat. He's running a little crosser. He's running a sit-down route in the middle. Now, they still prioritize him. Kyler's getting the ball on the first read like a ton. But could Tyler Warren be in that vein? Or do you still see Trey McBride as being like a step above as far as like his versatility?
Yeah, it's a great question. I had a strong grade for Trey McBride, if I recall. Yeah, he was a good tier higher. He was my number one guy, and he had an 85.9, meaning like immediate starter. And I saw him more as a Zach Ertz guy who was a little bit more rugged, someone who he's valuable in the short and intermediate range. He was someone that was more nimble as a ball carrier than what I ever saw out of Warren. Like Warren, right. I saw as like a guy who worked well in rugby scrums. You know, basically.
I think he's I think he's really fun to watch.
He is like, but you get him in open space, or you get him to overpower people. That's great, but I just don't know if that projects. My sticking point is I don't know if it's going to project well enough for him to do the same things in the NFL with the ball in his hands that he did in college
with those defenders.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So I think there were things schemed up to make
I would think
look
maybe
like a bully.
It might work because the archetype of an NFL linebacker has changed so much in like the last 20 years. It might work. Like I would say 15 years ago, like when every defense was built the way Bill Parcells would build one. And you've got linebackers that are 265, maybe a problem. But man, there's so many linebackers now that are like 235.
Yeah, but you need better feet, and I don't think he has the feet to do that. But I could be wrong. But either way.
So everything's going to be a collision. That will be the only way to win.
That's basically what I think. He's going to be. People are going to be hugging him or colliding with him, and then that's nice. But he's not getting in the open space that way unless they just feed him a misdirection play, and he's in an open alley, and he gets a good 15-yard head start. And now you're looking at a Clint Kubiak offense where they run the play action throwback. And he can do what Will Dissly does when he gets a play-action throwback. So maybe Will Dissly's another one that you can look at and say, like, post-injury Will Dissly. And you can say, okay, maybe that guy's maybe in that comparison range too. Good, but not Brock Bowers. You're not winning that way.
What I'll say to the folks tuning in and listening, like, I'm not saying that Tyler Warren's going to be a bust. I'm just calling out the fact that, like, draft capital is pushing him way up in the model. Yeah. Really what you like to see in the way the model is working in the super model versus the non-draft capital is see that, like, you're going to have gaps always. He'll be 3 or 4 spots higher in one or the other. But anytime I see these outliers where it's 24 or 25 points, that always concerns me. And so it's just something I like to call out for people, like with the draft capital that he is expected to get in mock drafts right now. And then you put everything together. like 67% of his comps, since 2018 have gone on to be top 12 fantasy tight ends. So that's still a really good hit rate. And you guys know tight ends are tougher. Tight ends are tougher to get your hit rates on. 33% of them went on to be top 9 in their first 3 seasons. So again, not saying Tyler Warren's going to be this complete bust. I think he's actually got a decent profile, but was really interesting that the non-draft capital model thought that, and then I saw what you had, and I was like, wow, those two things line up.
Because to me it's the bigger question for you to take away from this, I think, for everybody is he closer to Tucker Kraft or is he closer to Brock Bowers? And I'd say if the draft
Tucker
capital
Kraft.
is the draft capital saying Brock Bowers, but when you put these two together, you're like, no way, no how. He's more Tucker Kraft, which is good. Like you said, low end top 12.
The landing spot could really matter a lot more for him than Colston Loveland.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's the thing with Loveland. But I want to get to Luther Burden because you mentioned Burden as being like, it's almost like they're inversely the perspective is inverse to one another. So why is it that Burden, who looks like to some models like he's just basically a gadget player, why does your model like him more in the role of like we were joking on X one day, you mentioned your model and I copied it and said I don't give a fuck, like basically and then you so the model feels the same way, Matt, and then JJ Zachariason chimed in and said my model doesn't give a fuck either, and
he said the Zap model agrees with the supermodel, which agrees with the RSP.
And we had a whole chain of like people like basically having a good laugh about that. So what's the why with Luther Burden?
Yeah, so, number one, Luther Burden stood out, early in his collegiate career. And, while he fell off some as a junior, the model doesn't say, well, oh my God, that just means that you're done. And I think some people in their models, I think they're over penalizing Luther Burden for that. And that's why I don't want anything in the model for the supermodel to work in a binary way. Everything is scaled, right? So yeah, it matters, but there's not going to be this huge bump down just because of that. And the reason why is the data says that we've seen so many of these prospects that dropped off in their junior years versus having a huge sophomore year that have still been good. Would you ultimately rather see them be great as a sophomore and also great as a junior? Yes, that will actually give them a higher score in the model, but everything gets weighted. So the way the supermodel works is what you do in your freshman and sophomore seasons, like if you go nuts, like you get even more credit for that. But you also get a lot of credit for what you did as a junior and then a little bit less as a senior. And if you're a 5th-year senior, you don't get quite as much credit for what you do in that final year. So when you balance it all out, though, Luther Burden, he gets an 81 production rating in the supermodel. And that's a 1.35 career adjusted receiving yards per team pass attempt, which already accounts for the fact that he didn't play on the best program, 57th percentile from Missouri during his time there. And the way I figure that is I use the power index from ESPN, which is great because they're running, 20,000 simulations of what these teams look like. Ultimately, you get to the end of the year and you're down to the final 2 teams. But Burden, he's a player that even though the schedule wasn't that demanding, the quality of the program he was on wasn't that great, didn't have a ton of competition for targets. All that's already calculated in the model. Again, there's an expected number that the model's looking for based on all these factors. And then it's like, were you above or below that? And he came out at the 64th percentile, which is really good. He was also good, obviously, once he had the ball in his hands. But the big thing for me is because he did those things so early, like Tyler Warren became kind of a gadgety player and never was able to get on the field until year 5. Like Luther Burden was immediately on the field, was a 5-star recruit, and he's a player that shined very early in his career. And so the other thing for me is as I started to narrow down like comps for him and even trying to be skeptical of him, taking what you're hearing the public say, which is, oh my gosh, all he can do is catch screenplays and do this or do that. I went back and started to say, okay, for guys where his production rating is similar, guys where his film rating is similar, and then guys that went in a similar range of the draft, who were his closest comps in the model? And I'm going to give you a few. So one, Luther Burden, 9.1 average depth of target. 32% of his targets came behind the line of scrimmage, which is a lot. but 21% of his targets came deep. That's only 1 percentage point below the average prospect since 2018. But here were the two closest guys just from those data points. Calvin Ridley had a 9.8 average depth of target. 29% of his targets came behind the line of scrimmage, only 3 percentage points different than Burden. 19% of his targets came deep, so slightly less than Burden. And then Brandon Ayuk. Brandon Ayuk had a 10.6 average depth of target, but 29% of his targets came behind the line of scrimmage.
So let me interrupt
22%. Yeah, go ahead.
Interrupt real quick. So I've been on a number of shows, and with JJ and I, when I did his show, my comp for him was Brandon Ayuk. And then JJ interrupted and said I had Matt Harmon on, and Matt Harmon's comp for him was Brandon Ayuk. So you've basically got 3 different ways of looking at this, and the comps all have Brandon Ayuk in common, a player who everyone criticized as all he does is catch screen passes, RPOs, slants, crossing routes, and occasionally a play action pass. And he's one of the better route runners in the league. Go ahead. So.
Yeah, and he developed. No, so I mean, that's it. So that was the huge component of it where, again, like had Luther Burden been a 5th-year senior and never done anything, and then suddenly he's in this gadget role, that's one thing, right? But because he was doing these things earlier in his career, and he was clearly a player that right away they wanted to feature. They were figuring out what's a way to get this guy on the field. And the other component of it really is also Lance Zierlein's grade on the guy. And so whenever you look at what Lance had to say about him, he had high praise for Burden from a perspective of, while what he may have done in college is this set of things, he saw him as being a guy that once he gets on an NFL team, they're going to unlock the next level of his game. When he watched his film, he saw upside in the things that he wasn't necessarily asked to do, or not asked to do as much in college. And I think that's really where the magic happens. And that's where I do think that what happens with film analysis and what you do, what it can do better than this data that I'm looking at is understand what a potential ceiling could be for a player based on attributes and traits that historically you have graded and qualified and seen that, man, when players have this sort of thing, even though they might not have done it a ton in college, it usually really means there could be another level to their game in the NFL. And so that 84 film rating, which is based off of a grade of 6.47 from Lance, is also really helping Luther Burden and the model. And that's why I want to have a film component to the model, because I think there are natural limitations to what we can get from a pure analytical data profile that doesn't look at film. And so when you put all those things together, the model really likes Luther Burden. Now his expected draft capital is falling, so we'll see what happens to him. Can he still be a late round 1 pick? Right now, most mock drafts have him being round 2. So yeah, very interested in hearing your thoughts on Burden, and specifically like this whole thought track around, players are only what they are in college versus, this idea that they could actually grow. And what are the things you're looking for that tell you that about a guy like Burden?
Yeah, because I think what happens is that, the models and tracking of information is obviously got great value, and there's layers, and you can see some historical value and allow you to see things in perspective from a backdrop of what has worked and what hasn't worked in a certain sense. But the problem with like a player like Luther Burden is that what you're looking for when you're looking at film, if you're looking at film in a constructive way, which is the hard thing, is that there's a lot of variation in how constructive people are being, just like what people choose to use with their formulas and how they tend to scale things, like you were talking about with production and going down, and how some choose to see it one way, some choose to score it another and punish more or punish less. It's the same thing with film. It's just seen more subjectively as a result. But what I think where the RSP makes a difference sometimes with this stuff is that I'm looking at techniques and concepts and understanding of those things, and how much technique they have, how much understanding of concepts they have, and how well they can use craft with the techniques that they have. Because it's one thing to have good footwork to have certain footwork techniques off the line, or to execute a break a certain way, like that you drop your hips and decelerate into a break, or that you have a too quick or a double up off of the line of scrimmage. You can show that tool, and if you're a big, strong, fast athlete and you show the tool to most college cornerbacks, they tend to bite on it, or they tend to not be able to overcome it, or they're confused by it, or that it works good enough. But when you get to the NFL, you have to have some extra craft with it, meaning that you have to be patient and sudden and use pacing changes to set up that footwork the way that I was showing Dave Kluge today. We were doing we were watching tape together of Trey Harris, and then I pulled up some tape of Chad Ochocinco and of Devontae Adams, and he was bringing up Devontae Adams, but like of guys like that, and showing how they perform the same maneuver, but it looks completely different because of craft. And so when oftentimes what people will do is they'll look at the technique and say, he has the technique, but is he performing it with the craft that you need to see in the NFL? And that's where you get more points in the RSP, is the craftier you are with this. And if you have the skills, you understand the concept and have the craft, you start to accelerate, move up the ladder in terms of the scoring. So with Luther Burden, you may only see a limited number of reps where he wins against a certain type of coverage or certain type of route downfield. But when he does it, the technique is so dense and exact and craft-filled that you're like, that's not instinct. You've worked on this stuff. You know how to do these things that make a difference. Watching somebody catch a ball on a back shoulder fade where they're parallel with the ground and make an enormously athletic extension with a defender tight to them, it's a wonderfully athletic play. There's no craft whatsoever because you tracked the ball too late. You had to leave your feet too
let
late.
me ask you something real quick, Matt.
Yeah.
If you are evaluating a player, because this just fascinates me, and you see they have the technique, but they don't have the craft. Maybe they have some elements of the craft. How often do you see them develop the craft at the next level? Or is it something, if they don't have elements of that craft yet, typically once they get to the NFL, like they're just still not going to have it?
It depends on the technique that's being
on the skill set or the thing we're talking about.
Yes.
Like a release versus tracking the ball are two different things.
Releases, it can happen. Like Devontae Adams didn't come into the league with the types of releases he has now. Okay, so he developed the craft, and now he's great at it. Now, certain types of weight drop and acceleration into breaks, that might be harder. That's why I got certain ways.
So when you grade guys, do you give them more room to potentially expand in those areas that are easier versus on the things where that's much harder or more rare that you've actually seen them gotten better at the NFL, and it's almost more of a hard grade, like this is probably what they are?
Yes.
Okay.
That's
awesome.
Yeah.
That's really
because
cool.
I have these tiers in what I don't show people.
The brain of Matt Waldman.
What I don't show.
No telling what all's in there.
Be afraid, okay? But like it's sillier than generally what's anything worthwhile. But they're in the Excel tiers that I use, that I tell people about, where I go through and have the skill tier breakdowns where everybody's
hard fixes versus easy fix stuff.
Yeah. There's little notes in my Excel sheet that I don't show with the scoring right now. But I plan to. But it's like things that say he's got to do this. He's got to do like this bullet list of things to be in this tier. He's got to do this. So it can be like for separation, I might say he's got to be in the committee tier for releases. He's got to show at least 2 moves, and then with his feet and his hands in conjunction to do this. And then to get to the next tier, he's got to be able to stack defenders. And then to be able to get to the next tier after that, he's got to show some patience and suddenness with at least 2 to 3 of those moves, to show that he can separate against an NFL defender with this stuff. Why, like when I looked at Malik Neighbors, it's like it's not even close because every move he had looked like he's been doing Devontae Adams shit, and at LSU, and you're just like. I know that like people can look at the same thing and go, well, this guy got got open a lot too. And I'm like, yeah, but he's going to get open against an NFL primary defender. This guy's not getting open against the primary NFL defender, even though it looks good. So, yes,
Gotcha.
that's the kind
Really
of
good stuff. Thanks
yeah, no problem. So, like, yeah, Burden, the other things are like Burden uncovers, like, concepts. He uncovers quickly, he covers late in routes where he's working against the defender off script. Things that like Ladd McConkey did in the red zone with Justin Herbert last year, and that Herbert and Mays, like, this dude's like plays like a 5-year veteran, because like you want to see receivers who know, okay, I'm on the same page with you. I was running an intermediate route against this safety, and now I saw, when I broke open inside, I saw that you're breaking out of the pocket, so I adjust my route and go downfield. And now the safety is on the inside of me, and I know that I've got, based on how I ran that route downfield vertically, that there's nobody on my right side. But I'm running where I'm looking inside to my left. And you see that too. And you and I both know that where you need to place that ball is outside. So I'm going to keep baiting the safety as if I'm tracking the ball over my inside shoulder. And at the very last second with the ball in the air, I'm going to stop and turn inside and then break outside and be wide open and make an extended catch, where some people might look at that and go, the quarterback just, he threw it back shoulder, or he was inaccurate and he had to make this late adjustment, when it was really, I'm uncovering for you and we're baiting this guy all the way. And that's the kind of stuff that Burden does. And not once, when we're talking about routes, setups, releases, tracking the ball late, and being able to he makes the turns you want, like we talked about the guy extending and doing the Nestea plunge to try and extend for a ball. This guy tracks the ball early enough so that he can win it. He does all these crafty things, and strong technical and conceptual things. And not once have we talked about how dominant he is with the ball in his hands after the catch.
Lance really likes him too. Not to put words in Lance's mouth, I'm just using Lance's grade. But I mean, he comes in at an 84 film rating in the model. He comes in as my wide receiver 5 in the model in the class. But Tet McMillan is the number 1 wide receiver in the model. But he actually has a lower film rating from Lance. He's like you. He with Luther Burden, he gave him the higher film rating than what we have with Tet. Now Travis Hunter got the highest film grade, even looking at just what Lance had him for at receiver, which he threw out on social media one day. He said, here's what I have him graded for cornerback, here's what I have him graded for receiver. So I was lucky enough to somebody else sent that to me and said, hey, I don't know if you missed this, but it allowed me to actually put that in there. So I think it's really interesting, what you're saying. The model likes Tet more because like how productive he was multiple years, right? When you had Burden, he did have a little bit of a fall off. So, but it sounds like for you, like you feel like Burden's probably got the highest ceiling of all these guys, unless maybe Travis Hunter. If Travis Hunter were to play full-time receiver, would you move Hunter above him, or would Burden still be your top guy?
No, that'd still be 1-2 with those guys, and it would be very close, and they'd still be top 6 from last year's class.
Okay.
So they're good. They're good.
I know we probably have somebody else to jump to. We could go on.
Well, let's go to Tet.
Burden, but
let's go to Tet, since that's the case. You brought him up, and for me, I mean, the reason he was lower for me maybe than the model, from one of the things he brought up, is I think when I watch his game, if I were to sum up what I saw on film, he has good skills and he's definitely going to contribute right away. But I don't see him as the type of route runner that you put on par with Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Luther Burden, the Malik Neighbors, guys who can win timing routes at a high level. I think he's maybe capable of developing into a better timing route runner, but I see him more as the boundary winner, number 2, who people say, oh, well, production-wise, he could be a number 1. He's kind of a bully in what he does physically. He's very strong at winning tight coverage targets. He wins well after the catch. I like what he does after the catch. There's some routes that he runs pretty well. But I found that again, while Matt, like a good example of like, data and compiling data and then looking at how do you fit in, how to project that data reasonably to the league. And that's the craft of it that's hard, is the craft of looking at Tet McMillan as a separator. Because Matt, who does fantastic work, you should go get
Matt Harmon.
Matt Harmon, reception perception, gotta go get that. It's a fantastic resource, and not few better guys in this space. Matt talked about it. He goes, he separated very well on my reception perception data. It's all green. It looks like a Christmas tree. And people get excited about that. And I would say, if I'm right, and I might not be, but if I'm right about Tet McMillan, it would be that that the data compiles the separation that you see for right now, but maybe doesn't project certain layers of information as maybe as much of a refined way that carries over to what the NFL might expect. And I would say that I didn't see him separated a way that I thought projected as cleanly to the NFL, with certain types of timing routes and certain work off the line of scrimmage, where I think he may be successful right now, but he may not be as successful early on. So I expect he'll have a role that will work well. It will convert to a starting role, but I would rather see him more as like a Drake London circa 2024, playing inside, working outside, and let him win that way, where he has two-way goes, rather than putting him at the line of scrimmage and expecting him to win timing routes there. You're going to move him outside when you're going to have him do boundary work.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've heard a lot of people say that they think he has to get the power slot, to be successful. I don't know if I agree with that or not.
Right.
I certainly hear what you're saying. So I mean, the thing with Tet McMillan, again, like we've got the multiple components here. Production rating is an 88. Like the guy had a 27% target share in his over his career. That's insane, because you can't get that if you're not good as a freshman and a sophomore and a junior. Like you just can't have a number like that. It's nuts. And if you look at his career adjusted receiving yards per team pass attempt, which is what the main thing that goes into the production rating, it's a 80th percentile. Not quite as great like when he had his opportunities, 57th percentile in career quarterback rating, but still good, like above the 50th percentile. But the thing, like as I started to dig into him more, that like I was like, man, I don't know. I mean, like, how much do I care about some of these other things? Because if you look at him against man, he absolutely was peppered with targets, 29%, and he's a big framed guy. So sometimes you see these guys in college, it's like maybe they don't project great to the next level as far as being able to separate. But like if they're so big and they can box people out, it's like just kind of, hey, just get me the ball. Just get me the ball. And it feels like that's what his collegiate quarterbacks did. They were just like, oh, you got man coverage, we're just going to throw it to you. Against zone, 22% targets per route run, which was slightly below like the average prospect since 2018, which is at 23%. But he also hit all areas of the field. 35% of his targets came 0 to 9 yards down the field. 33% of his targets came 10 to 19, which is above the average of 26%. And then 25% of his targets came 20 plus yards down the field, above the average of 22% for NFL draft prospects since 2018. And he did play wide almost 80% of the time. So it's not like he had to depend on being inside. I know his production was boosted a little bit from when he was inside versus outside. So I don't know. It's one of those where I also do wonder, like, could it come down to the quarterback that he lands with if like this separation and ability to truly, distance himself from NFL defenders becomes a problem? Because I do feel like we've seen historically certain wide receivers that was a challenge for them, but they had a quarterback that was willing just to get them the ball anyway.
Yeah.
Like a Jay Cutler type, a Baker Mayfield, a my guy kind of thing. Oh, you got single coverage, like whether it's zone or man, like I'm coming to you, like you're the one getting the ball. And I do wonder if like we get a little nitpicky with a player like Tet, and ultimately really that's all that matters. And he can be very successful. Like in the model, 100% of his comparisons ended up being a top 36 wide receiver within their first 3 years. 80% of them became top 24. Now, a little tougher to get that high-end outcome of being a wide receiver 1, top 12, only 30%. Having said all that, He is another one of these players that when you take the draft capital out, he is 16 spots lower in the non-draft capital version since 2018. So not just in this class, but where his overall rank would be in the supermodel. So the model did have it is saying that ultimately his draft capital is probably boosting him a little bit higher than what the model would say about him by itself. But it's not like a big enough red flag. Like, he's in a range. It's a 16-point difference. Historically, the ones where it really became a red flag is when you start to get to like 40 spots different in the non-draft capital model versus the super model. Like, that list includes Jahan Dotson, went on to be a bust. Jalen Reagor went on to be a bust. Kadarius Toney went on to be a bust. The range that you see Tet in is closer to Zay Flowers. Zay Flowers was a -27. Hasn't been a superstar, but it's been, if you drafted him in fantasy, like where you got him at the end of round 1 in your rookie draft or early round 2, you've been fine. The other one, DJ Moore was a -27, who's turned out fine. Rashad Bateman's another one like that. One's been more of a bust. So he's kind of in that range where I'm not overly worried about it. Had he been, another 20 spots lower, then I would feel like I was in like really tough territory, because the model is definitely those players that it has called out, they have gone on to really kind of flop in the NFL.
Well, you and I sound like we're on the same page, because it's like, to me, it's like, I think he's two types of players. He can be the big boundary winner like T. Higgins and Mike Williams. He can do that. But are you asking him?
But if you juiced him in the slot, you think that's where he could really, if he were to hit a wide receiver 1 outcome, it's probably playing that kind of role.
That's exactly it.
Gotcha.
To be top 5, you're going to have to put him
okay. I think
role.
The model could agree with that.
Yeah. But so for me, that's why he's 5th on my board at wide receiver, because it's like he didn't score high enough in the areas that project for an outside number 1 receiver, more the guys that people say he can produce really well, but he's more top 24.
So like if you went to the Cowboys, where CeeDee Lamb is going to get most of that slot treatment because they view him as a playmaker, they want to quickly get into space, and that kind of locked him out of that role.
He's top 24.
He has to be okay. Yeah. So you're saying he's a wide receiver 2 in that role, versus he lands on a team where you could like kind of squint and see the path of, man, they might really work him inside.
Yes.
That would be, and not that we can ever truly predict what these coaches are going to do, but like, this is what we're paid to do, is to try to project those things.
If Drake London didn't exist, and say Drake London decides that he's going to quit and become a goat herder, okay, and we find out next week, and Michael Penix is like, I love what Drake London did. Can we find somebody to do that? Tet McMillan would be a good potential fit there.
Yeah. What about in an offense like Denver, where you would have a Sean Payton, potentially not the same exact role, but more Sean Payton will typically play that player outside, but have them running all those similar route concepts, outside in, like a Michael Thomas, even going back, Marquez Colston.
Perfect.
He did a little bit with Cortland Sutton. I don't know that that's really a great fit for Cortland Sutton's game long term. But like Tet McMillan to Denver, would that?
Perfect.
What about Tet McMillan to the Raiders if they decided not to take Genty? And you got Geno Smith there. Jacoby Myers is probably going to play the slot, huh? So he's probably ends up being boundary there. Okay,
yeah. I think Denver's perfect. You hit on that one. I think that's a great one. All right. So with that in mind, why does every film evaluator, as you asked me earlier, you posted some of these questions.
This is my question to Matt.
Why does every film evaluator love Jack Bech? The model's okay, but the film grade seems to be sky high.
Lance's film grade is carrying Bech in the model.
Okay.
Production, all that stuff is pretty stinky. So Lance Zierlein is holding him up in the model to at least being. Here's the thing: the non-draft capital model says that he's 36 spots overrated than the model, which includes draft capital. So the two things holding up Bech, I should be fair here, in the model are his projected draft capital, which the latest I have in here is him going picks 66, right? So potentially being a fringy into second round pick, but Lance gives him a film rating of 81, which is like on par with some of these other guys we talked about. Luther Burden was at an 84. Who else? We just talked about Tet McMillan. He's got an 82. So, I mean, like Lance really likes some things here. And what's interesting, I heard Ben Solak go on and on about him. I know Matt Harmon has had positive things to say about Jack Bech. So, yeah, I do turn it over to you. Like, what the hell are these data idiots like me missing with Jack Bech?
I don't know, because I have him 7th on my board, which is still pretty high. And he has a starter.
Dude, that's pretty high.
It is.
For a guy with a
23rd
percentile production rating,
Yeah.
and for so many film analysts
Yeah.
to just totally ignore that and say they don't care. And I know he's not in anybody's top 3, but it's normally a prospect like this would be like your 25th guy.
Yeah. Well, let's keep digging deeper, because I'm going to get to that. You are totally anticipating my point, which is great. No, it's all right. It's fun. But like, yeah, he's got an 86 on my score right now, which is just over starter tier. You can come right in. Now, mind you, when I give a guy scores like this, people need to understand that there's probably already 2 or 3 wide receivers on a team who are within that same range. So you're still working your way into a line. Now, if you score like a 93 like Luther Burden, if there's another guy on your team like that, then your offense better be fucking excited about what you have. It's kind of like adding Travis Hunter with Malik Neighbors, or Luther Burden with Malik Neighbors, or Jordan Addison to Justin Jefferson. But
yeah.
Bech is interesting to me, because if there's a player that I'm afraid I overrated, it would be him. And it's not because I knew any of what these other guys thought. It was that when I look at his scores, there were some things with his pass catching where I could see I was on the borderline between giving him points that if I didn't give it to him, he would probably be wide receiver 15 rather than wide receiver 7. And then
that's a big difference.
It is a big difference. It is a big difference. So what I'm leaning on is the things that he did as a pass catcher that weren't good at times, were they lapses or bad habits? And from what I saw, I felt like they were lapses that could be improved upon. That were not.
And so lapses, the way you think of that is like, you just lost your concentration, but we know you can do it. Bad habits is like they're going to have to fix something in your game at the next level, versus just telling you to like, hey, focus.
Perfect example is 2 other TCU players. Quentin Johnston, when the ball was in a certain position in the field,
the clapper,
he either clapped or he didn't know which way to use his hands. He was the Ricky Bobby getting interviewed after the first race, where his hands keep coming up because I don't know what to do with my hands. He has that where like the ball's above his chest and he's doing this with his hands underhand rather than attacking away overhand. He does that a lot. So it's like when you don't apply the right technique because you can't react fast enough to know to do it the right way, you end up fighting the ball. And that's more of a problem, a bad habit. When you are catching a target away from your frame and you're using the right technique with your hands, but you either look away to get downfield and it's a focus drop, like you said, or your hands come apart at the last minute, and it doesn't happen on every route like this, but you have moments where you've had to extend wider than you thought and your hands come apart when you had them together. That's more of a lapse, so or occasionally because you're so wide that you have certain lapses with targets that are just very difficult, that can be a little bit more of a lapse than a habit because you've seen them do it successfully before in those situations. So from what I saw of Bech, they were more lapses than bad habits. The same was true with Savion Williams. He had more lapses than bad habits. They knew where to use their hands. Bech also, with agility, he got an extra point for his agility based on his ability to transition downhill at a 90-degree angle with a small number of steps, and the way that he was able to use his feet to make people miss that was technically sound. But if I'm overstating that, even by a point with him, he would probably be wide receiver 10, there. if I add both the issues that I just talked about, and I took, basically 4.5 points off of his score, we're talking now, where is he? Okay, so he's there, 4.5 points. Okay, yeah. So he would be at about an 82, which would be still a guy that could contribute, but now we're looking at top 24, like the end of the top 24, around Alec Iamanor, who neither your model nor I are particularly excited about. But from what I've seen of him, obviously I felt confident enough to put him on that board because he does catch the ball in traffic well. He is quick off the line. He does do a lot of good work with releases and getting open. And
do you see him mostly as a immediate fit, short, being a slot player, probably working short to intermediate? Yes. 47% of his targets came 0 to 9 yards down the field. He only lined up wide 37% of the time.
He is what he is, and it's good, and it's good enough. So
he needs to land somewhere that would run a lot of 3 wide receiver sets, and that position would be open for him to take over. And ultimately, if he could land somewhere where they love to scheme stuff up for those slot wide receivers, which isn't always the case. You go to the Bengals, you can be a slot receiver all you want, but the ball's going to Jamar Chase.
He's a flanker slot hybrid that you're betting that whose ability is good enough to project him for that role, but you're putting him outside, and it's much more.
So for Tet McMillan, power slot would be nice. It unlocks more. Jack Bech, that's the role he needs to play.
Yeah, I'd say that's probably. Yeah, I'd say that. Yeah, I would say that's closer to the truth. Though, because if you put him at flanker, he's more of a Josh Palmer type of player, or at best,
Chris Godwin ceiling. Or no. Too far.
No, that's too far. Okay. I maybe it's because I have too much reverence for him. But Michael Wilson, if he had a better quarterback, I would. I
knew you would have to get at Kyler at some point.
I do.
We need a bell. Like when I'm on with you, I need something.
It's not just
I can sound.
It's just everybody now. It's like I've gone off Chad Kelly to talking about him. So now we're on to railing about Kyler Murray, on everything.
You need to have Kyler Murray's dad on your show, because I think he might be like a major enabler for Kyler, and maybe you need to get to the root of all this.
Yeah, that's true.
And have Pappy start, really holding Kyler accountable. I don't know what's going on, but anyway, I just feel like that would be theater. You might not like the show though.
I might not, but I might have the guy on who did the analytics study that showed when Call of Duty updates came out, that Kyler's production
was pretty hilarious.
Yeah, that was pretty awesome.
I'm hoping that was just variance, but that was pretty that was interesting.
It was pretty fascinating. But yeah, so Bech is one of those players that I admit when I look at him that there could be a little more variance than I would like to see with my score.
All right. Stay with the last letter B, but let's go Bond.
Okay.
Because I will say now, JJ Zachariason's model actually likes Bond more than the supermodel. So you're probably going to be more in alignment with him. But the supermodel, and now the supermodel slightly likes Bond more without draft capital, 7 spots. So draft capital is holding him down a bit, but still where he ends up ranking for me is the 88th prospect since 2018 as a wide receiver. And he ranks right now, let's see, is this is really great podcasting here. Probably like wide receiver 10. But I know that you've got Bond, I believe, in your top 5 in the RSP. So and here I will just say really quickly with Bond, analytically, the problem here is it loves where he played. Gives him credit, right? For the fact that you're at Alabama, then you go to Texas, you play with a lot of other good players. So it's giving him credit for that. But even after adjusting for all that, his adjusted career receiving yards per team pass attempts in the 36th percentile. And that makes his production rating a 70, which is a really, again, 75 is like the midpoint because it's on a 50 to 100 scale. So 70 is below that. Now Lance's grade, once again, 80 is actually helping prop him up in the model. So there are some things that Lance liked. And Lance did say, hey, even though this guy wasn't really utilized in college, the traits he shows are NFL traits. That's essentially. So the way I worded it in the supermodel was you have to. This is a projection pick in my mind. This is a player that did not necessarily show it all in college, but the film evaluators see something that mean it could work at the next level. So now I'll let you fill in blanks because you really do like Bond in the RSP.
His route running is really strong. I think he's a better route runner than Matthew Golden, who people have sometimes rated above him. He's one of the 3 best route runners, I think, in this class in a lot of respects, because what he does well is he knows how to accelerate into the top of his stems and really use that speed as a bully pulpit for all his timing routes. He's a good timing route runner who also can win over the middle of the field. He adjusts well and uncovers like Luther Burden that I described. There's some plays where he does a masterful job of uncovering.
So when you say bully pulpit, what you mean is he can leverage his speed in a way to put fear into defenders that unlock all these other things for him.
That's right.
And create separation in the routes.
Yes,
when he makes his breaks.
Every route in theory, you should make the defender think that there's a possibility you're going to run right past him on a 9 route. And
so he's not Darius Hayward-Bay, who had that, but obviously didn't know how to use that to unlock the other part, which was being open for catches.
Exactly. Bond actually, and there's a lot of guys like Hayward-Bay where he would accelerate fast, but he didn't have great breaks back to the ball, or that you have guys who end up who are fast, but they run these routes breaking back to the quarterback slowly, or they raise their shoulders, or they don't have good deceleration, and they can only run the route at half speed. Like Trey Harris is a good example of a ball winner who's very good as a ball winner, more in that Tet McMillan type of role on the outside, who can run after the catch really well. But when you ask him to run hard-breaking routes like curls and comebacks and things like that, he runs much slower, and he can bend, but he's not fully confident in it yet. I think he can get there because you see it's there, but he's like someone who's playing chess, where like someone who's really good at chess, and unless they're playing another chess master, they're moving pretty fast. They know where everything's going to go. Someone who's not sure what move they're going to make, and they're still studying the board as they like make the move, and then they keep their finger on the top of the piece. When you watch Trey Harris, you see him kind of like moving at a half speed or 3/4 speed with certain routes, because he was a former quarterback still trying to figure out the route game. Bond has no such issues. Runs everything at full speed.
How do you think about guys like this, Matt? Because it's another interesting one, right? Where it's like, hey, projecting what the player could do based on what the film says. It's kind of the opposite of some players that we've talked about, where maybe they got the opportunities, but the film didn't necessarily love them, didn't dislike them. But this is the opposite, right? This is a player that, how does a player that's this good just never get really the production in college? Like, it's just weird to me. Yeah. Typically, teams use their best players. Now, I know he played with some other good players, but it's not like Matthew Golden was at this time last year thought of a guy that's a surefire top end round 1 pick. Right?
It's a great question. So, sometimes if you're the speed guy on a team and they put you in the Henry Ruggs role in Alabama,
sacrificial X,
sacrificial X, exactly. That's a great phrase. If you do that, then that's one thing. And then if Matthew Golden's more your extension of the run game, and you have a quarterback like Quinn Ewers who has difficulty
doesn't want to challenge vertically,
and doesn't do a good job with it, then maybe Golden gets more love in that respect.
So the example I've seen of this was Terry McLaurin.
Yeah.
In college, Terry McLaurin really never at any point showed an analytical numbers-based profile, excluding film, that would have made anyone in that community think that he was going to suddenly be a superstar. Now he was really good when targeted, which is it helps catch some of these guys. So the supermodel actually ranked Terry McLaurin higher than what probably a lot of other models would rank him. But I'm not sitting here trying to toot the horn, because it still didn't say this guy's going to be a breakout, right? Well, and he's the guy that you want to target.
McLaurin's the guy that I state every year. If I'm going to be wrong on a player every year, and I don't care, for the rest of my life, it will be a Terry McLaurin, because of his hands techniques are awful. How the hell he catches a football with such bad technique.
So it sounds like
He
actually the
traps
film didn't
everything.
like Terry McLaurin or the data.
My
And he
film
still
didn't.
became successful.
Yeah, my film didn't. He's like a bumblebee. The physics say there's impossible that he can fly, but he certainly can. And it's like, because he traps everything. I mean, like, he catches balls like he's like a 1970s wide receiver, you know? And he wins every time. Like Steve Largent, somebody brought this up on my staff. It was like, Largent caught like this a lot. And I'm like, well, you know, it's evolved since then. And, you know, but there are still guys who I guess who can win like that, but they're fewer and far between on my board. So, like, yeah, to me, it's like more guys who catch like that aren't good in the NFL, far more than guys turn out to be like McLaurin. There's very few McLaurin type players.
So he truly is an outlier.
He is.
He actually defied all odds.
Yeah, he did. He's fast. He's fast and he's tough. And somehow he's still. I swear to God, if we find out in like 20 years that he is a billionaire or millionaire manufacturer of some sort of chemical that just got banned by the NFL for wide receivers to use, kind of like the modern day stickum, I would be totally
easy.
I would
You're going to piss off Ian Hartitz. You can't talk too bad about Ohio State.
I told you. Look, most of my family are alums there, Ian. It's okay. Okay, most of them. My dad went there. You know, my grandfather. I've got uncles who all went there. They all love Ohio State. There's enough there. I got to give you a little. But yeah, I love what McLaurin has done. All due great respect for his game. If Bond's like McLaurin, he does it with better hands. The reason I would joke that Bond isn't good is that you know, if I'm going to just talk about
is that you don't know if he's going to be out on Bond.
That's right. That's exactly it. Because
he's got the off-field stuff.
I am a magnet for liking really bad off-field problem receivers. Michael Westbrook was the first wide receiver love of my life. He punched out Stephen Davis, you know, and won the MMA, and he had one good season, one or two good seasons.
Michael Westbrook, Colorado.
Yeah, Michael Westbrook. Josh Gordon. I was cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs over Josh Gordon, you know. Hell, we can go to Chad Kelly. We get another mention of him. But I mean, like, folks who are not good off the field, I do sometimes have I certainly do have have some sort of imprinting that, like, I'm a magnet for some of that. So I love Jermaine Burton last year too. You know,
I was going to say Jermaine Burton. Yeah. I think I remember you liking him a lot.
I did like him a lot too. On the field, Isaiah Bond is great. Off the field, we'll see it. Bond to me is like a T.Y. Hilton type. He can be that speedy slot receiver, but if you want to put him outside, he can win that way. He's like Marvin Mims if Marvin Mims had technical skills.
So this is your show, but I know we only have a few minutes left. There's a name I really want to hear your thoughts on because this player is absolutely skyrocketing up the boards. This was a player that 6 weeks ago was not even getting drafted in mock drafts, and now potentially could be a second round pick. I've updated him to pick 91 based on the latest mock draft data, but it's wide receiver out of Washington State, Kyle Williams. And the model, I will say this, the supermodel, when I first ran it, said that Kyle Williams was underrated by 42 spots. And now that his draft capital is upgraded, the non-draft capital model is pretty much in alignment with the supermodel. There are 3 points difference between them. The model knows that it's discounting. It's not discounting. It's hitting him for the fact that his program quality was in the 19th percentile, strength of schedule 35th percentile. But even after accounting for all that, because he exceeded expectations, even for someone that got to play that kind of schedule, his production rating comes in at an 80. And that was the thing earlier on that the model was saying this dude should be higher. But what are your thoughts on Kyle Williams? How much he's risen up the board, and do you think like he's worthy of that praise, and where do you stand on him?
I'm not shocked that he's rising fast because he has, from what I graded, he has near star level separation skills because of his speed.
Well, that's great.
And he has good. He has at least a couple of good release techniques that you would want to see, and he's capable of stacking defenders, so he can get behind people and he can win that way. The route game, he's also near elite as a route runner in terms of my scoring. So you're seeing him, consistently be sharp and precise with his breaks, soft, hard breaks and speed breaks. He can, win versus press, find open zones, sideline awareness, work with the quarterback. He tells a decent story to get open in terms of the craft of route running with setups and things like that. And then even with, where's the other parts that I want to say that were near that? Elusiveness and vision, near elite in those areas too. After the catch, really
And
strong.
where do you have him?
I have him.
You said
down.
Near elite on multiple things here.
Yeah,
you better
I did.
have him high.
I don't.
So why not? Why is he not higher?
Because he's not a good pass catcher.
Oh, he can't catch the ball?
He's not quite good enough as a pass catcher. He is committee level as a pass catcher, and I award a lot of points for being able to catch a football.
So what's his deal? Is it the hand positioning stuff again?
Yeah, he clap attacks targets and drops them, fights the ball a lot. Like if I look up his thing, we're gonna, since we're at the end of the show and we have more good podcasting demeanor here on the show because we really worry about that shit here at the RSP cast. My podcast, my business.
You're just really sweating it.
I'm literally the Terry McLaurin of podcasters. It's like it should not work, but somehow it does. Okay, so his hands are often too wide. And he drops targets that are away from his frame. Low targets, like underhand position, low targets. He can high point well, but he also has lapses he uses the wrong attack for the height of the ball. So he drops targets like Quentin Johnston drops them, and when you're in tight coverage in the NFL, you've got to be able to narrow that margin of error, because they're gonna get their hands on it if you're not attacking it early enough.
How hard is that to correct? Is it
hard
correctable at the next level, or is this one of those things that's like, it's probably not gonna get there?
Probably not, because we're seeing Quentin Johnson improve, but it didn't quite get there. And the last guy I saw who really corrected his hands well was Quincy Enunwa, and that was before his neck got hurt. But I literally watched him.
Jets.
Remember when Enunwa was at Nebraska?
Was he in Nebraska?
Yeah. He was. I literally saw him try and catch a ball like this. I mean, you could have to see it, but I have my forearms crossed and my hands.
Michael Gallup would do that sometimes.
Yeah, it's the most puzzling thing in the world. But he worked his ass off, he said, every day, before and after practice.
Jugs machine.
Yes.
Amon-Ra St. Brown's dad got a hold of him.
Yes, pretty much. Yes. And locked him in the room and told him, if you don't work
on
this,
we're going to break your nose.
We're going to bring Brett the Hitman Hart's father down here to teach you wrestling. Back like.
So he could.
Yeah, he could.
It's possible, but it's a super, super high level commitment.
Yes, because there's 3 ways that he drops the ball. He has it's like Ty Felton. Ty Felton should be one of the best 3 receivers in this class based on how he runs routes. But every single way you can drop a ball, he does it. And it's it's a habit. It's like this is gonna be awful, Dwayne, that I say this, but I said this on the Chicago Bears podcast where we all are in a bar room and act like we're drunk. You've heard, this is I can't even do it. It's but I would say let's just say, but his hands is basically what I would call Ty Felton.
So
but his hands.
If you were an NFL coach and Kyle Williams comes to your team, what would you do? Would you just basically say, dude, just body catch everything because you don't know what to do with your hands? Is that the only potential shortcut he would have, or do you think you could actually give him instruction that would get him there?
I'd probably have my GM in my ear and pissed off that he's not on the field right now. But I'd be like, dude, until this is what you need to work on. These are the things you need to do. If your coach isn't doing this shit, fire him. And here's a coach I recommend. You're going to work with this dude before and after practice every day. I want to see what the lesson plan is for you on how you're advancing through this stuff. And when it gets ingrained in your game, I'm going to put you in the lineup and you're going to be our guy. You are going to have a bright future here, but you're not going to have a future here if you don't do this.
Gotcha.
So he's going to be that wild child. You're going to see moments and go, God, we got to get him on the field more. And then
is it kind of like a Dontavian Wicks? We get that with Wicks. He does certain things really well, and then the target comes and the drop happens.
that could be the case. Yes, it's
All
like
right.
all the way up. You're going to be like, oh my god, this is great, and then
So he's a guy that's going to really tease me for like 3 years, is what you're telling me. Because
yeah, because like I have my score for him is an 82, which is still high, but
yeah,
it's a rotational starter if you play to his strengths. So what you want is the vertical game is what you. That's the problem. You look at him and you go, this should be like Chris Olave. This guy should be
mm,
Chris Olave, but he's Chris Olave with like just remedial hands right now.
yeah.
And if he fixes it, like if he just fixes the clap attacking, he might move up another tier. But you're still looking at a guy who's banging on the door to try and be a starter, you know. But
Well, do you have one more name from our list? We joke. Matt and I had a list of 15 players here. We knew we'd never get to them, but
right,
is there one more you're wanting to hit here before we before we wrap that we didn't hit?
sure, why not? Let's look here. I would say Jayden Blue. Let's talk
Yeah.
about Jayden Blue because you were saying the rise of Jayden Blue, and that's who I thought you were about to mention here with this. What does your model think about this dude?
Well, I mean, obviously, like the big talking point here around Jayden Blue is just how much he's moved up from expected draft capital. Essentially, he was a guy that I didn't even write up or do anything with. Like he was in the list, right? He was in the supermodel list, but he wasn't a guy that like in my initial round of write ups that I had anything on. Because he essentially went from being someone that we thought was going to be undrafted to now looking at his expected draft capital, pick 143. So still not great, but like, I mean, getting drafted. And if you look at what he has in the model, the things that are going for him, obviously program quality, playing at Texas works out really well for him. Strength of schedule, he played a tough schedule. But production rating, not that great. A 66. Now he shared a backfield, which isn't abnormal for these backs that go to these bigger schools. A lot of them do have to share the backfield. And even once like the other guy in front of you leaves, you've got the underclassmen that the coach now knows they have to give carries to, or they're going to lose them in the transfer portal the next year. So I think you look at Jayden Blue, and obviously, we had Bijan Robinson come from here. We had Roshan Johnson come from here. And they had a really good freshman this last year who ended up getting hurt. And that did open up some additional playing time for Blue. But ultimately, like the thing that's carrying him in the model, like the film score was not actually like that. It was okay. It was a 73. And remember, like 75 is the midpoint. But it's honestly the speed score. He's got an 81 speed score, a 106.5. And for those of you, most of you know what speed score is, but essentially you're combining weight with speed. So thinking of momentum, right? But that's really it. Like it's almost completely being carried by draft capital and speed. So that I wanted to bring him up to you because he is a big climber. And I don't see anything in the model that makes me just like gravitate to him other than the fact, well, he's fast. I will say I watched quite a bit of Jayden Blue because on the weekends, like in the football season, typically on Saturday, I have a buddy I go hang out with, and a lot of his friends are UT fans. So either the A&M game or the UT game. I am scouting UT and A&M players in season while drinking some beers. So I don't know how high quality that is. But what I would say about Jayden Blue is when I would watch the games, I didn't see the speed that got timed. Like I saw a guy that was nice, but if you would have told me like that he was going to run as fast as he did, I would have said you're crazy.
Well, that's great. That's great stuff. Like it's interesting. Like for me, I saw Blue, and when I looked at his overall profile, I thought he had he was a competent starter in terms of just power, being able to drag defenders, push forward, get yards after he's wrapped up. After contact, I would say, where he's getting hit, he's more of a committee level guy with direct contact. Indirect contact, he was also more of a committee level guy, which is the bare minimum you want for a starter. Like if you can run through hits from a linebacker and when you've got some downhill path, you're okay. He's okay there. Speed, I saw the speed, but then also like I also get to see some of the mile per hour stuff. I also gauged three ways, and I felt like the speed was elite. The
So you do
acceleration,
think like he can get to the next level and just run away from everyone?
no, it's
Oh no, okay,
almost. But like the speed,
almost.
when he gets to the top, when he gets to his top gear, he's going to pull away and and challenge a lot of cornerbacks. But getting to that top gear, he's more of a starter level, maybe a high end starter level, but not an
So
elite
the
accelerator.
acceleration,
Yeah,
yeah,
the
gotcha.
acceleration is where maybe he's not going to get it. It's like Omarion Hampton. It's like he's got top tier speed, but he needs a runway to really get it. And it's
What about in the passing game? Because the one potential thing that the model did see with him, he has a 23% targets per route run for his career, which is really good for a running back. He had a
he's one.
12% target share season. So I was wondering, is that
Yeah.
his path to
Yes.
earning playing time and trying to get maybe eventually get a bigger role?
He's one of my 5 best receivers,
Okay.
route runners. One of my 5 best route runners in this class at the position. And then as a receiver, he's probably one of my 4 or 5 best pass catchers. The reason that he's not higher on my board is he can't fucking hold on to the ball. He is literally losing points because he fumbles once every 45 and a half touches. Okay. The baseline just to ride the ride and say you're okay is 1 per 60. And
But how correctable do you think that one is?
well, that's the
Because I really do feel, and I tell me if I'm wrong. You're the guy that studies this, but I really feel like if you had a coach riding your ass about ball security, like it's not rocket science what you need to do if
you,
you're committed to doing it.
you would think so. So last year for football guys, I did a preliminary study where I took at the last 6 years of RSP evaluations, and I looked at how many times, and it was not the last 6 years, but it was a 6 year period because I wanted to have guys at least playing a few years before I did
Right,
it.
in the league.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I looked at those 6 years of evaluations, and I looked at what percentage of those guys who fell below that 1 per 60 mark, what percentage of them had one season as a top 24, what percentage of them had at least one season as a top 10. What was the number? 10% of the players only had top 24 once who fell below that. 3% only had top 10. Now, what I need to follow up on that I didn't do, and I was kind of realizing that, is that what percentage of those guys had certain scores, high scores,
Yeah. I
and
think we need to
corrected it.
normalize for where they went in the draft because a lot of it could be bad fumbler in college that was taken late and just didn't get an
Right.
opportunity.
Yep.
The one other thing that could be really interesting would be like how much did their fumble rate change for the ones
Right.
that obviously they'd have to get enough carries at the next level to
Yes.
to say that like you would have a sample. But I could see the flip side of that, which is they're fumbling in practice still, then we don't know that, and that's why they actually
Yeah.
never got on the field.
Marshawn Lloyd, who was a bad
Yeah.
fumbler and had some issues there, or guys like David Wilson, is a
What
great
could have
example
been
of that. Yeah,
David.
Stephon Ridley.
But don't you
then
think the coach matters too? Like, because that was like Tom Coughlin. I forgot what you and Sig
Yes.
used to say about him. What is he
Yeah.
like the grandpa with like the Werthers in the tray?
Yeah.
He doesn't want to give any of them
Yeah,
out. He's
well,
real stingy.
That was, I think, him and Cecil would say that all the time. And then
Yeah.
Gene would bring Werthers when we go to the Senior Bowl, and we'd call him Tom. But yeah, but so there's some things there that can be a bit of a concern. But can that could be corrected? Absolutely, it can be. But it is a difficult thing. It's a little bit more difficult to correct, only because you'd say technique-wise, it's easy to correct because you tighten the elbow.
Yeah, high and
You keep
tight,
that
high and tight, high and
You do
tight.
that.
You got the 3
Yeah.
points, or what is it? The 5 points of pressure, or whatever
Right.
it is. I don't know.
But think about when you start making dynamic movements. I watch these guys make dynamic movements, jumping over people, spinning away, pulling through tackles, getting their feet high, and it's so subconscious that your elbow gets away from you, or you're moving, or you're running at full speed and you're pumping your arms, and it's something that I've noticed. I've got a perfect example of a guy who never had really major fumbling issues was Tyson Williams, the South Carolina
Baltimore.
BYU guy. Went to Baltimore and literally came into camp the first year during COVID, like in August after tearing an ACL. Comes in and they put him in a scrimmage because they didn't want to play anybody else. And he was doing so well against the first team defense that he got signed to a contract pretty much that afternoon after doing that. And Mark Ingram was like, this dude can really play. Okay. And then the next year, after coming off the practice squad, has a fantastic summer. And John Harbaugh is literally like, he's coming off the field during the preseason. He's literally saying to me, he goes, I love watching you run. You know, names him the starter. Opening game against the Raiders. First half, good outing. First half, runs for a breakaway touchdown for part of that. Is running the ball well. Fumbles late in the half. Comes out in the second half, and he's literally trying to be Tiki Barber, holding on the ball for dear life, and his running style completely changed.
And you do see that with the guys now they're actually like doubling over the ball.
Yes.
Like too soon. Because it takes away you're once you go into that posture, like, can you truly now evade a tackler and build?
Are you seeing things the same way? You're overcorrecting everything. Now you're overthinking, and you can't think as a runner. You have to be at the speed of instinct. His game, and I remember asking Russ Landy about this when we did a show together, and I said, we were talking about veterans just in general and what happens and how veterans don't always help out rookies. And he goes, imagine these running back veterans who come into rooms and they know that there's a rookie ahead of them or a young player ahead of them who's playing really well, and you can get into their head and then maybe be able to keep this job. And I'm talking about Latavius Murray possibly being this guy. Not saying he actually did it, but you could imagine. I said, so you could imagine like Latavius Murray at the end of the half going, Tyson, man, you're playing balls out. You're just playing great. He goes, but dude, watch out for those fumbles. You fumble again, and you're going to be out of this league. Like, I've seen it over and over again. Basically baiting the dude, and then next thing you know, Tyson ends up losing carries, and guess who gets to stay in the game or stay on the depth chart and get paid because J.K. Dobbins is still out. It's like there's a little bit of that gamesmanship that sometimes goes on. But I would say ball handling for him was the big drop. If he had better ball handling, he would probably be in my top 10.
Cool.
Yeah. So this was great. Tell everybody.
Yeah.
Tell everybody where they can go as if they don't know.
Yeah. Guys, go over to fantasylife.com. Also, we have Thor. Thor has the top 500 up. There's going to be like 270 NFL draft picks, and Thor's got 500 of them created for you. So you're feeling pretty, you want to know who player 475 is? Like, you're totally going to have that. The supermodel articles are all up for free. If you want the supermodel data that goes back, obviously you can get that with a premium subscription. But this next week is what I wanted to talk about, because as the NFL draft is going, I will be updating the draft capital as it unfolds. And so those supermodel grades will be updating. And then next Sunday, so not this coming weekend, but the one after, when we have the draft, that Sunday, I will be writing up my rookie rankings based on all the new draft capital information that we get. And then that will release on that following Monday after the draft. We're going to be having shows all through that weekend. Thor's doing a live stream. I'll be myself and Ian and Kendall Valenzuela. We will be doing a show on the night of Thursday after round 1. We'll do another one after rounds 2 and 3 on Friday night, and then we'll have a recap Sunday, probably around 2 or 3 o'clock, where we'll be recapping the latter rounds, plus then just more of a whole draft. Hey, how did the teams do? So, yeah, wall-to-wall draft coverage. One of our favorite weeks of the year, Matt, for the folks of us, like, where it's like we get the new toys, we get to see where they all land, and start to kind of reevaluate what our priors have been about these teams. And so I'm really looking forward to that, and folks can check it all out over at fantasylife.com.
Yeah, it's great. Definitely go do that. Dwayne does fantastic work. Ian, fantastic work. All the people that Dwayne mentioned, the too many to list. It's kind of like football guys, too many to list. But we'll be doing similar draft work. Bloom and I will be doing our live show week 1 or day 1. Dave and Alfredo will be doing a draft party. I'll join them a little bit. over with that. And of course, the post draft is coming up pretty soon. And Matthew, it's okay. I am not playing the lottery tickets right now, so you have nothing to worry about. You know, and I'm sure I'd have to come more than correct to probably even have that happen. But then again, my lottery ticket might be Kelly Akiri. We can ask Thor if he watched Kelly Akiri. And see if he's got him ranked somewhere like 374. But thanks again, everyone. It's always a pleasure, and have yourselves a great weekend and a week ahead.